The camera pans over the once luxurious, but now tension-filled home of Kyle Richards and Mauricio Umansky, where decades of smiles, laughter, and holiday dinners are now being replaced by painful silences and tearful conversations. The cracks that began subtly now spread visibly across the surface of their marriage, each one too big to ignore. It started with a whisper. Hollywood is no stranger to rumors, but when murmurs began circulating about Kyle and Mauricio living separate lives under the same roof, fans hoped it was just another round of tabloid fiction. But behind closed doors, a different reality was unfolding, one that neither Kyle nor Mauricio could fully control anymore. In the living room, Kyle sat curled on a velvet couch, her knees drawn up, her face pale, and mascara streaking down her cheeks. Across from her, Mauricio stood, arms crossed, his eyes glossy with unshed tears. They weren't yelling. They weren't arguing. That was the scariest part. The silence between them spoke louder than any fight ever had. Kyle looked up, finally breaking the stillness. "Do you even love me anymore?" she whispered. Mauricio's face crumpled, and he knelt beside her. "Kyle, I never stopped. But I think we forgot how to show it." Their love story wasn't just a reality TV subplot. It was a public romance, a beacon of what fans believed was a stable marriage in the often messy world of reality television. For years, Kyle had navigated the drama of the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, while Mauricio built his real estate empire. Together, they were a power couple. But somewhere along the way, success became separation. The flashbacks were brutal. Mauricio remembered a time when Kyle would fall asleep on his shoulder after their daughter's ballet recitals. Kyle remembered waking up to handwritten notes from him when he had to leave early for work. They both remembered the trips to Aspen, where laughter echoed through the snowy slopes and their love felt like it could survive anything. But time has a way of changing things. Work obligations grew heavier. Kyle's filming schedule clashed with Mauricio's property showings. The girls grew up, and the house slowly emptied. Empty nest syndrome didn't hit them at once. It crept in quietly. Dinners became solo events. Evenings together turned into nights apart in the same home. And then came the emotional affair. It was never confirmed publicly. But within the four walls of their mansion, the truth was undeniable. Kyle had formed a bond with someone she met through mutual friends. It started innocently. Coffee meetings, long texts, late-night phone calls. Mauricio noticed. He felt her pull away, emotionally first, then physically. He confronted her once, asking if there was someone else. Kyle denied it. Not because she was hiding, but because she didn't know what it meant yet. "I didn't sleep with him," she'd said. "But I thought about it." Mauricio was shattered. That one sentence did more damage than any affair ever could. Emotional betrayal hits differently. It sticks in the bones. It makes you question every hug, every kiss, every "I love you" that came before. But Mauricio wasn't blameless either. He had grown cold, distant. Kyle often felt like she was just another item on his daily checklist. His success had made him inattentive. He forgot anniversaries, missed family dinners, took calls during date nights. Their love was dying a slow, quiet death, and neither had the tools to resuscitate it. Then came therapy. At first, they tried couples therapy quietly, away from the cameras. They wanted to protect what little privacy they had left. But when footage began surfacing of Kyle crying in her confessional interviews and Mauricio showing up to events alone, the speculation intensified. "We're working on things," Kyle told the press. But that wasn't the full story. In therapy, deep truths came to light. Kyle confessed that she often felt unseen, like a supporting character in Mauricio's ambitious world. Mauricio, in turn, admitted that he felt underappreciated, like Kyle's affection was conditional, something he had to earn, rather than receive freely. They fought hard in those sessions. But they also held hands afterward. It wasn't about saving the marriage just for appearances. It was about trying to remember who they were before the fame, before the pressure, before the cameras. But change takes more than effort. It takes timing. And for Kyle and Mauricio, that timing felt increasingly misaligned. One night, After a particularly raw therapy session, Kyle sat alone in the kitchen. The house was quiet. The girls were away. The silence was loud again. Mauricio walked in, carrying 2 glasses of wine. They sat in silence. Kyle finally broke it. "I don't know how we got here." Mauricio sighed. "I do. We stopped showing up. For each other." The conversation that followed was more honest than anything they'd shared in years. They admitted to the hurt, the loneliness, the fear of what divorce might do to their family. But they also admitted to a strange peace they both felt, like perhaps letting go was the only way to save what little love remained. The next morning, the tears came, not out of anger, but out of grief, mourning the end of a chapter, accepting that not all love stories are meant to last forever in the same form. Kyle sobbed into Mauricio's chest. He held her, crying too. They weren't husband and wife in that moment. They were just 2 people who had loved deeply, hurt each other, and finally realized that maybe love meant knowing when to let go. Still, they weren't ready to announce anything publicly. Behind the scenes, lawyers were contacted. Co-parenting plans were drafted. Their daughters were sat down one by one. There were more tears, more hugs, but oddly also relief. Because the pretending was over. Fans began noticing that Kyle had removed several Instagram posts with Mauricio. Speculation grew when Mauricio appeared at events without his wedding ring. Kyle was photographed leaving a Beverly Hills restaurant alone, wearing oversized sunglasses to hide swollen eyes. Meanwhile, Mauricio threw himself into work. His agency expanded. He launched a podcast. He smiled for the cameras, but close friends said the spark was gone. Kyle was his everything, one source shared. He just didn't know how to keep her. In private, Kyle focused on healing. She spent time with her daughters, went on soul-searching retreats, focused on her own projects, away from the Bravo cameras. They were still legally married, but emotionally, the separation had already begun. Then, a twist. In early spring, the 2 were seen together at a family birthday celebration, smiling, laughing, holding hands. Was it a reconciliation? Fans wanted to believe, but sources confirmed it was simply a show of unity for the kids. A reminder that no matter what, they would always be family. Still, the public couldn't look away. Every gesture was analyzed. Every glance between them was dissected by fans and tabloids alike. Then came the shocking interview. Kyle sat down with a major entertainment outlet. Her voice cracked as she said, "I will always love Mauricio. But sometimes love isn't enough." That line broke the internet. Mauricio, in a separate interview days later, echoed the sentiment. "We gave it everything. And maybe that's the win, not the forever, but the effort." The headlines were brutal. Rob's Kyle Richards and Mauricio Umansky confirm marriage breakdown. Kyle breaks down over divorce decision. "It's the hardest thing I've ever done." The air was thick with tension in the hallway of their Beverly Hills mansion. Kyle Richards stood at the door of their bedroom, hand on the frame, watching as Mauricio packed a weekend bag without saying a word. His shoulders were tense. Her heart was pounding. This wasn't a fight. Not anymore. This was surrender. "Where are you going?" she asked, barely above a whisper. Mauricio zipped the bag and turned. "I don't know. Just out of the house. For a few days." And just like that, the silence between them grew into something unrecognizable. Something that no longer felt like a pause. It felt like an ending. For over 2 decades, Kyle and Mauricio had been the gold standard for what fans believed was a solid Hollywood marriage. They had weathered the storms of reality TV, fame, financial pressure, and raising 4 daughters. But in recent months, something had shifted. Their dynamic became cold. Their interactions became transactional. And slowly, the love story fans adored began unraveling behind closed doors. The breakdown didn't come from one explosive argument or a dramatic betrayal. It came in pieces, missed conversations, unspoken resentments, buried insecurities. Kyle began feeling invisible in her own home. Mauricio started withdrawing into work, late meetings, and solo trips. At first, they chalked it up to stress. then to age, then to routine. But deep down, they both knew something was dying. Mauricio had always been the optimist, the fixer. But even he couldn't ignore the distance between them anymore. He began noticing how often Kyle slept with her back to him, how many meals they ate in silence, how many times they texted instead of speaking in person. One night, he walked into the living room and saw Kyle wiping her eyes while watching an old home video of their wedding. "You okay?" he asked. Kyle paused the video. "Do you ever feel like we're pretending?" He sat down beside her. "Sometimes." "Yeah." That conversation changed everything. From that moment forward, the pretense started to fall away. Kyle stopped trying to act like everything was perfect. Mauricio stopped deflecting. The walls they had built around themselves began to crumble, not with rage, but with exhaustion. They started seeing a marriage counselor again. This time, not to fix their relationship, but to understand how they had lost it. In those sessions, truths came pouring out. Kyle admitted she felt like she had been performing for years, on TV, in interviews, even in her marriage. That her identity had become tied to being the strong, composed woman everyone expected her to be. And that in trying to maintain that image, she lost touch with who she really was. Mauricio opened up about feeling pushed aside. That while he supported Kyle's career, he often felt like a background character in her life. That every time he tried to connect, she had a camera crew, a deadline, or a Bravo commitment. The therapist said something that haunted them both. Sometimes love doesn't die. It just gets buried under years of silence. Those words clung to Kyle like fog. She began journaling again, something she hadn't done since their early years of marriage. In those pages, she wrote about missing the man who used to leave her notes in her bag. The man who danced with her in the kitchen on Sunday mornings. The man who used to look at her like she was the only woman in the world. Mauricio, on his end, began taking walks at night, just to clear his head. He'd sit in the backyard, staring at the pool, wondering when they stopped being best friends. He tried to remember the last time they laughed until they cried. He couldn't. Then came the dinner that changed everything. It was supposed to be a simple night in just the two of them. No cameras, no kids, no expectations. Kyle cooked his favorite meal. Mauricio brought wine. They talked, really talked. For 4 straight hours, they laid it all out. Fears, regrets, pain, and longing. There were tears. There were apologies. There were even a few laughs. But by the end it was clear. They loved each other deeply. But they had changed. And the versions of themselves that fell in love no longer existed in the same way. The love hadn't vanished. It had just outgrown the life they built together. A week later, they told the girls. That was the hardest part. Their daughters had always seen them as unbreakable. Mauricio's eyes welled up as he looked at his youngest. "We're still your parents. We still love you. We just need something different now." The girls cried. Kyle cried. Mauricio cried. But there was no anger in that moment. Only grief. In the days that followed, they began living more like roommates. They coordinated schedules, divided household responsibilities, avoided emotional landmines. Kyle started spending more time at her retreat in Palm Springs. Mauricio immersed himself in expanding his agency and launching new ventures. The separation was unofficial, quiet, but real. And then came the photos. Paparazzi caught Kyle without her ring. Mauricio was seen having dinner with a friend who fans quickly speculated was more than a friend. The headlines were relentless. Kyle and Mauricio split? Inside the couple's silent divorce. Kyle Richards seen crying at LAX. Is it over? They didn't respond. Not at first. But the pressure mounted. Fans demanded answers. Blogs dissected every facial expression. Finally, Kyle released a statement. "We're going through a difficult time and ask for privacy as we work through this as a family." Mauricio released his own. "We love each other deeply and are committed to co-parenting with respect and love." The statements were diplomatic, measured, but they didn't capture the heartbreak behind them. One evening, Kyle was alone in her bedroom, scrolling through photos on her phone, vacations, Christmas mornings, family beach trips. She landed on a photo from their 15th anniversary. They were on a yacht in Italy, her head on his chest, his hand in her hair. Pure joy. She broke down sobbing. Downstairs, Mauricio was looking through old emails. He found one Kyle had sent him years ago. The subject line read, "You're still my favorite person." He closed his laptop and cried. These weren't the tears of bitterness. These were the tears of people who had tried, who had loved fully, who had built something beautiful and were now quietly watching it fade. They began spending time apart more intentionally. Kyle started therapy on her own. She dove into spirituality, yoga, even creative writing. Mauricio took up hiking, reconnecting with friends he had lost touch with over the years. But no matter how far they drifted, they kept circling back. Birthdays, holidays, graduations. Each time, the emotions came rushing back. It was a strange kind of love. One that couldn't continue as a marriage but refused to disappear entirely. Eventually, they began discussions about what separation would look like legally. Who would keep the house? How they divide time with the kids? What co-parenting would look like? And though they never used the word divorce publicly, they knew that's where it was heading. They began crafting new boundaries, sleeping in different rooms, separating finances, quietly working with attorneys. But it wasn't angry. It was respectful, introspective, careful. One day, Kyle looked at Mauricio across the kitchen island. "I don't hate you," she said. Mauricio smiled. "I could never hate you." Closure.